college, and this time I got to the second floor and I deposited what I needed to deposit, and then I went back down to the car and got the other thing I needed to deposit and walked back to the college and up to the second floor and managed eventually to complete all my tasks. So I wish I did have a decent memory. And I should have talked about this at the end of my story rather than at the beginning, so I do hope I remember that. And another thing I must remember is we must never put out those chairs. That chair there is the most uncomfortable. The next time I'm helping to set things up, I must make sure that chair goes in the corner. Well, Herefordshire was mentioned. I think Tim mentioned Herefordshire. And this story does come from Herefordshire, from a town called Kington. And it's from some while ago, a traditional and very local story. It's a bit quaint, but I think it does tell us something about community. It's all about the community working together to solve a problem, and I just like it for that. It's also a story about when parsons were a lot thicker on the ground than they are now. Once upon a time in the village of Kington, there roamed a wicked spirit. He was named Black Vaughan, but they didn't really know where he came from. They assumed that it must have been the spirit of some wicked man who died long before. Be that as it may. He was a terror and a nuisance. He'd lurk behind hedges and then leap out onto the wagons and throw the goods off into the dirty trap below. He'd jump up behind the farmers' wives taking their butter and their cheeses to the market, and he'd prick the rear of the horse. The horse would then rear up, and away went cheeses and butter and wives all over the place. He'd rattle the windows at night. He'd turn over the milk churns, and he'd stampede the cattle. And one Sunday, he drove a bull into the church. On a Sunday, just when everybody was praying and the vicar was in the pulpit, intoning the prayers. And the bull clattered up the nave. Everybody hid under the pew benches. The vicar cowered down in the pulpit. And eventually, some brave farmers leapt out and drove him out of the church again. After that, people stopped going to the market at Kington. They were too frightened. And the farmers worried that the market would eventually have to be closed. Well, the farmers couldn't let this happen, so they decided that they must seek the advice of a wise man who lived up in the hills. And in a body, they went to the old man's house. And they all crowded into his little house, and there he sat, his old face yellow as parchment, and if I may borrow something, the lines of his face could fill 21 gallons of water. I should remember that one. And he sat on his little three-legged stool, his chin nesting on his gnarled fingers, and his gnarled fingers resting on his stick. And he heard their story as they told it to him. And at the end of it, he said, "Ah, you have a wicked spirit there, and he's getting bigger and bolder. You must deal with him, and the only way to deal with him is to lay him. You must lay him, and for that you're going to need 12 parsons, 12 stout-hearted parsons, not like that one last Sunday who cowered in the pulpit. 12 stout-hearted parsons, and also a mother with an innocent, week-old baby. And then those 12 parsons must read from the Bible, and they must pray. And in time you will read him down and down and down and down until he is small enough to fit in the snuff box. And then you can bury him like a mouse." So it was that a little while later, one November evening, 12 parsons assembled in Kington Church. Each had a candle, a lit candle, and a Bible, and also the mother with her baby. They stood in a ring, the 12 of them. And I'm afraid I don't think they were all stout-hearted, for several of the candles were shaking, and the candlelight flickered on the church wall that November night. On the floor in the middle was a snuff box, open, and behind the ring stood the mother with her baby. And behind them, as many of the congregation of Kington as had dared to come. They began with a hymn. And after the congregation had sung the hymn, the service proper began. The oldest parson stood up and said, Blackthorn, Blackthorn, are you there? There was silence. All that could be heard was the branches of the trees rustling against the windows, moved by the November wind. And when the parsons got to work, they opened their Bibles, and they all began to read. And they read loudly, bravely, and in unison. Then there was a sudden movement in the air. And the candle was knocked out and went out and fell to the ground. The parson holding it fell to his knees. And there was the sound of triumphant laughter from high up in the church. And the second, third, and fourth candle went out. Some of the congregation at this started to leave. But the eldest parson said, No, my friends, do not leave. Stay. We have succeeded in bringing Blackthorn here. And we will succeed. He will get weaker. We will read him down yet. Have faith, my friends. And the people that were about to leave came back and took their places again. But a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh candle went out. And now the church got darker. But it seemed that the parson was right. The candles were being knocked out with less violence. And that triumphant laughter was now the laughter of more of a boy than of a man. And then the eighth candle went out. And the ninth candle went out. But now the parsons had got to reading that part in the Bible where Jesus expelled the demons from the madman and sent them into the Gadarene swine, and they charged over the cliff. But a different sound was heard now. High up in the church, they heard a bumping noise. A bumping noise. And it's the noise of a bird trying to fly out through a closed window. He's trying to get out, said the people. Read on, parson, read on. The bumping stopped. The 10th and the 11th candle went out. The oldest parson was now the only one with a lit candle. He dropped through his book Bible on the floor and held up the candle. But the flames seemed to be burning brighter. The church was now almost dark, and apart from the parson's voice, silent. And so they heard the next noise, which was the sound as if of a bird falling dead on the ground with a little thud. He's down, said the people. The priest held his candle even higher and said, Blackthorn, I command you, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, into that box. Silence. And then they heard a tiny patter of feet crossing the stone floor. And the priest spoke again. Blackthorn, Blackthorn, are you ready to be laid? And a tiny squeaky voice said, Yes, I'm ready. He's in the box, said the parson. A strong man rushed forward, shut the snuff box and tied it tightly with twine. And then he took the little snuff box and he put it inside an iron casket and locked the key. And then the whole congregation, led by the brave parson, left the church and walked down the path until they came to the deepest pond they could find, where the strong man threw the casket into the middle of the pond. And that was the end of Black Vaughan. Thank you.
Great story. Well, that brings us to the end of the evening. I'm going to ask Tim Oakes to step up again and tell us some more of his coracle tales. Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
I know some very unfortunate things I can say about Kington. Is that camera on?
No.
Thank God for that. Why wasn't Jesus born in Kington? Because they couldn't find 3 wise men, let alone a virgin. And how can you tell when a Kington girl's had an orgasm? She drops her chips. Should say that in polite company. We continue, right, it's part 2. I will do a couple of coracle things and then we could go almost anywhere. This is a story, this is a strange story. I first heard this in Scandinavia. My brother lives on a little rock in the middle of the Baltic called Bornholm. Some people describe it as an island. My brother describes it as a small chunk of turf with 20,000 drunks clinging to it. It's a wonderful place, and they have a coracle tradition that is absolutely brilliant. And this story comes from there. This involves a farmer. And he comes down one morning, and his family are all there having breakfast, and everything is going absolutely brilliantly. He just sits there and he thinks, well, my son's reaching the age now where he's starting to take on some of the really serious work on the farm. And his little brother's learning from him, and his little sister is learning to be a brilliant farmer's wife. This is coming together. And my wife thinks, well, she's constant as the sun coming out, and absolutely like a knife and fork in terms of reliability. But pride comes before every fall. He went out into the barn that day, and he went to have a look at where the cows were. Something wasn't quite right. The gate was open, and the cows had been in and out, but he hadn't milked them. So he went and had a look, and the milk buckets had been kicked all over the place. The cows had been milked, but the milk had somehow vanished. He walked over to see the pigs, and he counted the piglets. There were 2 missing. Somebody had left the gate open. Well, he railed at the family. What's going on? First the cows lose their milk, what's happening? We know nothing. We've been doing our homework. We've been tending to the kitchen garden. We've been nowhere near the main part of the farm. What's going on? Days and weeks followed. Every day the farmer would work. Every night he'd go to bed. Every morning he'd wake up. And things would have been demolished, deconstructed. Walls that he'd built to that height would be that high in the morning. Streams that he had dammed to make a very nice little dam, the dam would be that high and would have flooded the meadow. Gates vanished. Gates vanished and were replaced by other gates, far too small for the gate. So the sheep and the cattle and the pigs all ran wild around the district. But eventually, he went to see a local witch and said, look, all this is happening to my farm. What's going on? She said, you've got a spriggan. Now, you don't know what a spriggan is. In English language, we have pixies, goblins, ghosties, all that sort of thing. But in Scandinavia, they've got a delineated list of all the different fairies that there are. And to digress for one moment, did you know that 40% of all adults in Iceland claim to believe in fairies? Enough.
They have to remove the big rocks because otherwise everything falls apart.
Anyway, the fairies were evidently making a terrible mess of his farm, and the witch said, you must get a grasp on this. You cannot let them continue. The only thing you can do, lay the fairy down, the spriggan down that is causing you so much trouble. We'll march around the farm. Well, they marched around the farm, but every time they marched around, they tripped over. You have to do a complete circumference. Day or still around, marking your feet as you go, one foot into the other, dropping a single grain of salt between every footstep. Only that way can you seal the boundary all the way around. The farmer tried for several days. At no time could they manage it. But the witch said, you must do this. He said, I can't. There's something happening.
I get about 3/4 way around, the Spriggan makes a soft patch, something goes on. I don't know. And in despair, he went to sit in his chair. And a little voice from out the barn said, "I'm hungry." So he thought, right. So he went and collected all the eggs, milked all the cows, made sure everything was locked up, and there was silence, except a little voice that came out of the barn going, "I'm hungry." "I must starve you out," he said to the witch. "Is that possible?" The witch said, "I'm not sure. You can try. I'm not sure." So for days and weeks, he was so diligent, not a single grain would be allowed to leave the grain store. Everything was locked and sealed. But after a month of this, the little voice still kept coming out of the barn. "I'm hungry." Eventually the farmer went to the witch and said, "Can't do it. We can't walk it out, we can't lay it, we can't starve it out. What do we do?" She said, "Move." I know, it's terrible, you know. You've got all this climate crunch, you've got all this credit change, but you're going to have to move. So the farmer put the farm on the market, but you know, as it went, everybody knew the place had a problem. It went for a song. Just pennies in the pounds of what the whole place was worth. But the farmer, well, he was resigned to it, and so were his family. So they took the tiny little bag of gold that they got for their entire farm, and they bought a cart, and they bought 2 horses, and they put all their possessions on the top of the back of the cart. Everything that they had, all their boxes and everything. And the children all climbed up on the front, and the old farmer climbed up with his wife. And they whipped up the horses. Once, twice, and just before he struck the 3rd blow, a tiny voice came out from under the pile of furniture on the cart and said, "I see it's moving day."